Good morning to everyone who's tuned in, and welcome, Victoria. For those of you who don't know us, I'm Mark Abley, Managing Director at Fathom, and Victoria is our Head of Advice. Fathom is an independent financial advisor firm based in Spennymoor, County Durham, and today in this Let's Talk With podcast, we're going to chat about lasting powers of attorney and how important they can be to your financial well-being, especially in times of crisis. Victoria explained yesterday why Fathom has got involved in helping draft wills, but just to recap, we've in the past directed our clients to solicitors to set up wills and lasting powers of attorney. However, there's always been a bit of a reluctance, something that our clients just kept putting on the back burner. And because we felt that these are really important parts of estate planning, we've teamed up with a specialist firm, Silver Lining Estate Planning, to help our clients put in place these crucial but often overlooked documents. So, Victoria, welcome.
And morning.
What is a lasting power of attorney?
So, a power of attorney is actually a legal document which allows you, known as the donor, to appoint one or more people, known as attorneys, to make decisions on your behalf when you no longer have the capacity to make those decisions yourself.
Okay. Now, I understand from what I've read that there are two different types. So what are they? And a supplementary question, why would you have both of them?
Yeah, so you're absolutely right, Mark. There are two. There's the health and welfare lasting power of attorney and also the property and financial affair power of attorney. So as the name suggests, the health and welfare power of attorney allows somebody to make decisions on your medical treatment and the provision of your care. So they can make decisions as to whether you receive life-sustaining treatment or not, depending on the circumstances. And they can also decide, where you live, where you're cared for, and the type of care that you receive. They also can make decisions about your day-to-day care. So things like your diet, how you dress, and your daily routine.
Sounds like my life now with Catherine.
Well, with the property and financial affair lasting power of attorney, again, as the name suggests, it just allows somebody to look after and make decisions about your day-to-day finances. So they can look after your bank accounts and ensure that your bills are being paid, etc. They can also make applications and deal with any benefit or pension payments that you might be entitled to. They can also make decisions on buying, selling, or making some adaptations to your home that you might need. So with the powers of attorney, the lasting powers of attorney, Mark, you can actually choose to have one or the other, or actually both. And we would recommend having both in place because essentially, in short, it means you're covering all aspects of life and the decisions that might need to be made when you can't do that.
Okay, well, that brings two questions to mind immediately. One is, so does that mean any attorney can just start making decisions on my behalf? So how does that work?
Yeah.
And the second one really is, what if, say, for example, my attorney thinks that if I was ill and on a life support or something, what if I didn't want to be resuscitated?
Okay, so in terms of when they can start making the decisions for you, you can have that set up immediately, but I don't know about you, I'm more than capable of making my own decisions at the moment, so I wouldn't want necessarily somebody to do that right now. But the most popular choice really is having it come into effect when you're no longer mentally or medically, you're not capacitated enough to make that decision yourself.
Okay.
In terms of the medical side of it, you can put the health and welfare property lasting power of attorney in place, but you can caveat that to say, that you want medical decisions left to the medical profession. So they get to make that decision rather than, your attorney.
Okay, so you've got some control even though you're out of control, if that makes some sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So let's say you become incapacitated for whatever reason, but you don't have a lasting power of attorney. What happens then?
So that can give you really big problems, Mark, as you need to then apply to the Court of Protection for something called a deputyship. Now, this is quite costly and is quite a lengthy process. And you need to remember that whilst the courts are making their decisions, nobody can actually access your bank account or pay any bills. And sometimes it can take upwards of 6 months.
Right.
Now, as a family member, you can make the application, but you need to satisfy a number of rules, such as, you can't be declared bankrupt, you can't have a criminal record. And it's important because it's the courts that make the final decision and not you. And they can actually reject an application if they deem the person not to be fit and proper. Right. And that means they can appoint somebody like a solicitor or even a member of the local council. And, I don't know about you, but I would definitely prefer somebody that I trust and know to make my decisions rather than somebody that I don't.
Well,
but
sorry. No, I was going to say I certainly wouldn't want the local authority dealing with my affairs, that's for sure.
Exactly. And something else to be aware of, as with anything else that involves courts, there's, cost involved, and it's quite significant. You're looking at between £900 and £1,000 just to set up. But alongside that, there's an annual fee that needs to be paid, and that's to allow the courts to continue to assess your suitability in making those decisions.
Right. Okay. So here's an interesting thought then. What happens if you were running your own business and something happened?
So most people, think that if they're a sole trader or a sole director, then their other half or a member of their family can just jump in and take over. Now, that's fine to a certain degree, and they may be able to look after some of the day-to-day running of the business, but actually they wouldn't be able to do the things that keep the business running, like, paying for your suppliers, paying for your products, or even paying your staff. And without those things, unfortunately, it can have a detrimental effect on the business.
Okay.
Also, if the business is run with co-directors, you need to ask yourself whether you would feel comfortable that the other director has the experience or even the expertise, and whether or not they've got, your best interests at heart when it comes to running the business. So you might want to ensure that you've got somebody that you know and trust that can sit alongside that co-director and continue to effectively run the business for you. There's been, unfortunately, a number of instances where, businesses have failed because even with the best of intentions, the wrong decisions have been made when it comes to the running of the business.
Right, yeah, I could see that.
Quite an important part of succession planning if you're a business owner.
Yeah, I can see that. So are there any other examples that you could give us where it would have been beneficial for somebody to have a lasting power of attorney?
Well, due to COVID, lasting powers of attorney have become a lot more prevalent in the past. You may have seen or read about the lady who was arrested trying to take a 97-year-old mum out of the care home just as the second lockdown happened. Yeah,
they handcuffed her, didn't they?
They did, and there was the photo of her sitting in the back of the police car, etc. Yeah. Now, that lady in particular, was a retired nurse, so was more than capable of actually looking after her mum. And, they'd gone so far as putting in place a lasting power of attorney to look after the mum's property and financial affairs, but they hadn't done the one that looked after her mum's health and welfare. What that meant was it was actually the care home that was legally responsible for her mum's care and not her. And that meant by trying to take her mum home, taking her out of the care home, she was actually breaking the law, which is crazy when you think about it. Now, fortunately, the authorities saw sense and no further action was taken, but her mum was returned to that care home and had to stay there for the duration of lockdown. If they'd had health and welfare lasting power of attorney in place for her mum, then, there wouldn't have been any confusion, there would have been no requirement for the police to get involved, and she could have taken her mum home.
Right. Oh, well, yeah, powerful. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. There's another high-profile case, Mark, which involved Kate Garraway and her husband, Derek. As we're all probably aware, Derek was unfortunately diagnosed with coronavirus in April 2020, and, he's been in a coma ever since. Like a lot of couples nowadays, not all of their bank accounts or their assets are in joint names, and normally, that wouldn't be much of an issue. Mm-hmm. However, Kate ran into difficulties when the family car was stolen. The problem was that the car and the car insurance was actually in Derek's name.
Right.
Normally, the insurance companies have very limited scope as to what they can do to help. But as Kate's, quite high profile household name, things did get resolved. Whether that would happen for the normal Joe public, I'm not so sure. But since then, Kate's been really vocal in the press that her situation would have been made a lot easier if she'd had a lasting power of attorney in place. But I think, like a lot of us, we see somebody who is incapacitated is somebody who's a lot older. But I think the case really highlighted the fact that we don't know what's around the corner, and actually age is irrelevant to this.
Yeah, yeah, I can see that. So I guess what you're actually saying then is, for most people, this is just, it's an insurance policy.
Absolutely. I mean, as a nation, we're brought up to understand the importance of insurance. For example, we all insure our homes against fire, flooding, or theft, and we do the same with our cars. And we even insure our own lives against death. But something that's just as important is insuring ourselves for when we're alive, but we're unable to make our own decisions. And I know I want the peace of mind of knowing that if that happens to me, then I've got somebody that I know and trust making the decisions, rather than somebody that I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. Quick question. Many years ago, I set up an enduring power of attorney.
Okay.
So do I need to change that?
No, not at all, Mark, because they are still valid, but it is worth having them checked out by a professional. Just make sure, they remain relevant and up to date, and they still reflect your wishes.
Okay. So what's the key differences between them then?
So lasting powers of attorney replaced enduring powers of attorney in 2007. So in terms of differences, the enduring document is one document and it covers all aspects of caring and making decisions for another individual. An LPA is two separate documents, one which cares for your financial decisions and another that looks after the health and welfare, as we've already discussed.
Yeah.
So you can actually make the decision as to whether you have one or the other or both. But it also allows you to have the option to have different people responsible for each part. Right. So, for example, we had a lady quite recently who wanted to have a sister as the attorney responsible for looking after her health and welfare, and a niece responsible for the financial aspect. Now, that's not because she didn't trust her sister with her money or her niece with her health. She just chose the people that she felt would be the best for those particular responsibilities.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah.
One of the other differences between the two is that you can have a reserve with a lasting power of attorney. It's like a backup, so to speak. Typically, most couples have their spouse or their partner as the attorney, but what happens if they no longer have the capacity to make decisions, or even worse, that they're no longer around? Having a reserve attorney gives you a backup plan, and unfortunately, that's not an option with an enduring power of attorney.
All right. So Catherine is my attorney. So if something had happened to her, does that void the enduring power?
Essentially, it does, Mark, because you've got nobody there as a backup to take over those instructions.
Right. Now, because I knew we were doing this morning, I've done a bit of reading on the subject. I'm by no means an expert, but the Office of the Public Guardian keeps popping up. So what's that?
Well, they're a government body who, using the framework of the Mental Capacity Act 2005, polices the activities of deputies, attorneys and guardians. So effectively, their role is to protect the people who lack the capacity from abuse. Now, all lasting powers of attorney, to be valid, they need to be registered with the Office of Public Guardian. The details are entered into a register, and the attorneys agree to follow the guidelines set out under the Mental Capacity Act. And they can only make decisions that are in the best interest of the person that they're looking after. Failure to do so can result in an investigation by the Office of Public Guardian, and depending on the severity, it can even lead to criminal proceedings. So they're there to protect.
All right, okay. So it sounds very involved and sort of quite complicated. So how easy is it to put these things in place?
So it's not, despite, if you look on the internet, etc., it's not as complicated as some people think. Now, just like we had the discussion yesterday with the wills, Mark, the hardest part is actually deciding who you trust to make the decisions on your behalf when you no longer have the capacity to do so. We definitely recommend that you talk this over with your family because it's really important that whoever you choose as your attorney, they understand their roles and responsibilities. Now, when it comes to the documentation, we'll help you fill out the forms and ensure that they're all, signed correctly before you then need to get them registered with the Office of Public Guardian.
Right. Okay, great. So process, how long? How long does that take?
Not too long. It's normally a couple of weeks to get all the documentation correct and signed. Essentially, the longest part is when it comes to registering the document with the Office of Public Guardian. At the moment, that's taken 8 to 9 weeks.
All right, okay. So there seems to be a lot going on here. It's quite involved. It sounds really technical. So is it expensive? What are the costs involved?
So it's not as expensive as you may think. So we're currently offering a single lasting power of attorney. So one of the ones that we've discussed from £200, or you can get both for £360.
All right. So how does that compare with the high street then? So if I went onto the high street and walked into a solicitor's office, what's it likely to cost me there?
Solicitors local to the area, you're looking at about £720 to £800 for both lasting powers of attorney. So, it can be quite expensive depending on where you go.
Yeah, okay. And are there any other costs that we need to consider?
Yeah, so there's an additional cost which is separate to the documentation that we've spoken about, and that's £82, and that's payable to the Office of Public Guardian for the registration of each document. So if you're registering both powers of attorney, it's going to be £164.
Right.
Okay.
In addition to the, and there's no way around that. That's.
So you can have the documents put together, Mark, but you don't actually have to register them at the time. You can register them at a later date, or you can register one or the other.
Right. Okay. So if somebody was going to just register one then, and I'm sure you wouldn't suggest that they only register one, but if they were, which one would it be?
So we would probably recommend that it's the health and welfare one that you get registered straight away. As we've talked about, you don't know what's around the corner, and getting it put in place afterwards is quite difficult. With the property and financial affairs, that can always be registered at a later date. So if you see somebody, that's slowly becoming incapacitated, start the process at that point. Just be aware that during that time, you're going to be, you're not going to have access to the bank accounts. So it might take a couple of weeks. But with the health and welfare, we think getting that registered straight away, it's just, peace of mind, that insurance policy, it's in place already.
Great. Well, I think that's about it for today. I'd like to thank everybody who's tuned in. I hope you found it very useful. I've certainly learned a lot today. I certainly think these lasting powers of attorney are valuable tools as well. And thanks to you, Victoria, for sharing that knowledge with us. I hope everybody that tuned in to our Let's Talk About podcast has found it useful. We've got another one scheduled for March, where I'll be talking with one of our financial planners, Gary Stewart, about ISAs and the importance of tax-efficient returns in your investment portfolios. So once again, thank you, Victoria. Thank you for sharing your knowledge with us today. If anybody would like any further information about lasting powers of attorney or writing your will, please give us a call on 0800 043 8341 or email us on letstalk@fathomfinancial.co.uk. Thanks and goodbye for now.
Thank you. Bye now.